Chris Roberts spent 12 years telling everyone instancing would never happen in Star Citizen. Not just unlikely, categorically rejected. The whole pitch was built around avoiding what every other MMO does. Then at CitizenCon 2025, CIG announced instancing arrives in 2026, and suddenly half the community is screaming betrayal, while the other half is celebrating like they just got rescued from a burning building. But both sides are arguing about the wrong thing. This isn't about whether instancing is good or bad. It's about what happens when a game's original vision collides with the reality of actually building it. You've probably been in that situation. You're at Siege of Orison, finally got your crew together, spent 40 minutes organizing ships and loadouts. You take the shuttle down, step onto the first platform, and before you can even orient yourself, someone's camping the landing zone with a grenade launcher. Your whole team is back at the hospital before the mission even started. Or maybe you're the person who showed up late to an event, and by the time you arrived, every objective was already completed by players who got there first. You're just walking through empty platforms, wondering what you missed. Both of those experiences, the griefing and the ghost town effect, they're symptoms of the same problem. And instancing is CIG's answer. Whether it's the right answer depends on what you think Star Citizen is supposed to be. Instancing means the game creates separate copies of the same location. Your group gets one copy, another group gets a different copy, and you never see each other even though you're technically in the same place. Your hangar already works this way. You step into an elevator, the doors close, and when they open, you're in your private space. No loading screen, no menu selection, just a seamless transition into an area that's yours alone. Most people think this announcement means Star Citizen is abandoning the single universe concept and turning into World of Warcraft with spaceships. That's not accurate. What's actually happening is CIG finally admitted that certain types of content, specifically missions with narratives, difficulty tuning, and intended group sizes, can't function in a completely open environment where player count and behavior are totally unpredictable. The controversy isn't really about the technology, it's about whether Star Citizen should prioritize reliable, curated experiences or preserve the chaotic, emergent sandbox where anything can happen and usually does. Go back and read Chris Roberts' 2014 letter from the chairman, the actual document, not what people remember about it. Roberts never said instancing technology wouldn't exist in Star Citizen. What he rejected was visible instancing, the kind where you pick a server from a drop-down menu, where you see loading screens, where you're permanently stuck on Realm 7 while your friend plays on Realm 12, and you can never meet. He wanted one universe, one galaxy server tracking everyone's position and assets. But even back then, he planned to use temporary battle instances for combat. The idea was these instances would spin up when players engaged each other, handle the fight, then dissolve back into the persistent universe when combat ended. Players wouldn't notice the transition. That was always the plan. What changed isn't the concept of instancing. What changed is CIG's understanding of what needs to be instanced. They thought it would just be dogfights and capital ship battles. Then they tried running Siege of Orison as a pure open-world event, and it became a case study in everything that breaks when you don't control the environment. Veterans would sprint through objectives in 15 minutes, while new players were still figuring out which shuttle to take. Griefers set up camps at spawn points. The dramatic story moments, the dialogue triggers, the lieutenant encounters, the final confrontation with the Nine Tails commander. Most players never saw any of it because the sheer congestion made it impossible to track what was happening. The 2026 instanced version will support 15 to 30 players with defined roles and scripted progression. It'll work every time, but it won't be the same experience. You know what? If you're still watching at this point, you're probably the kind of person who actually cares about understanding this stuff instead of just reacting to headlines. So do me a favor, subscribe. Not because I'm begging, but because this channel is basically the only place doing actual analysis instead of just reading patch notes at you. Plus, it makes the algorithm think I'm legitimate, which helps.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Anyway, if you've played Star Citizen for any length of time, you've experienced both sides of this equation. Maybe you've had those incredible unscripted moments, forming an impromptu crew with strangers to take down a bounty target, or stumbling into a massive battle you weren't expecting, or just having a random conversation with another player that turned into something memorable. But you've also had your cargo hauling mission ruined by someone who thought ramming your caterpillar was funny. You've shown up to bunkers where all the enemies were already dead. You've tried to do story content and had it completely derailed by random interference. That tension between emergent chaos and functional design, that's what CIG is trying to solve. The question is whether the solution creates more problems than it fixes. The real issue isn't instancing as a technology. It's what instancing reveals about Star Citizen's fundamental identity problem. This project has spent 13 years trying to be everything simultaneously. Hardcore space simulation, where consequences matter and skill determines outcomes. An accessible MMO where casual players can log in for an hour and accomplish something meaningful. a narrative-driven experience with cinematic story moments and character development, and an emergent sandbox where player choice creates unpredictable outcomes. Those design goals actively contradict each other. When CIG designs the reworked Siege of Orison as an instanced mission with fixed group sizes, defined difficulty scaling, and repeatable rewards, they're choosing narrative coherence over emergent chaos. That's a legitimate design decision, but it fundamentally changes what kind of game Star Citizen is becoming. Municipal Works, the underground facility coming to Levski, is described as progressive instanced content, where you complete chapters over multiple sessions with saved progress. That's not sandbox gameplay, that's a raid dungeon. The kind World of Warcraft has been doing for 20 years. There's nothing inherently wrong with that design. Millions of players love that structure, but it's a completely different philosophy from the one universe, all players, emergent everything pitch that convinced most people to back this project in the first place. The conflict isn't technical. CIG has the technology to do instancing. The conflict is philosophical. What is Star Citizen supposed to be? Picture this scenario. You're running a bunker mission on Microtech. Standard clear the hostiles contract, nothing fancy. You take the elevator down, and right as the doors open, there's another player already inside the facility. You both freeze. Neither of you knows if the other is about to open fire. 5 seconds of pure tension. Then, nothing. They don't shoot. You don't shoot. You end up clearing the bunker together without ever saying a word, splitting the loot at the end, and it becomes one of those random encounters that reminds you why this game feels different from everything else. No planning, no party invite, no coordination, just two strangers who decided not to be jerks to each other. Now imagine that same situation with instancing. You take the elevator down, and you're alone. The experience is more predictable, probably more balanced. Definitely less frustrating if that other player had decided to kill you instead of cooperate. But it's also less memorable, as that's the trade-off nobody wants to acknowledge directly. Instancing makes content work reliably, but it eliminates the possibility of those unscripted moments that make Star Citizen feel alive in ways other games don't. CIG isn't actually abandoning the open world, at least not according to their stated plans. They're building what they call a three-pillar system: open world, instancing, and dynamic content working in parallel. Open world content like the Rock Cracker mining event stays in shared space where PvP, territorial control, and emergent economics drive the experience. Organizations can fight over control of the mining platforms. Pirates can raid haulers transporting the refined materials. The economic ripples from one group's actions affect everyone else in the system. That's pure sandbox design. Instanced content like the reworked Siege of Orison provides curated, repeatable, story-driven experiences where group composition matters, difficulty scales appropriately, and external interference can't break the intended design. Dynamic content supposedly bridges both approaches, events that spawn in the open world but can scale based on participation, creating a middle ground between total chaos and complete control. If CIG actually executes this correctly, you'll be able to choose your experience based on what you want from the game at any given moment. Want structured group content with defined objectives and protection from griefing? Queue for an instanced mission? Want unpredictable sandbox chaos where anything can happen and frequently does? Stay in the open world and take contracts there. The problem is execution. CIG has to balance development resources between these parallel systems without one consuming the other. They have to make the transitions between instanced and open-world content feel seamless instead of jarring. And they have to maintain both design philosophies long-term instead of gradually abandoning one when it becomes inconvenient. Whether they can actually do this remains completely unproven. The Star Citizen community is basically split into two camps that can't quite understand each other's perspective. On Reddit and Spectrum, you've got players arguing that instancing is absolutely necessary for the game to function. That pure open-world design inevitably leads to griefing, broken events, and content that's inaccessible to anyone who isn't willing to tolerate constant PvP. Then you've got the other side saying instancing betrays the original vision and turns Star Citizen into just another theme park MMO wearing a space sim costume. Both groups are partially correct, which makes the argument impossible to resolve cleanly. The hardcore sandbox players who want maximum consequence and zero safety nets have a legitimate point. Instancing does reduce risk and eliminate certain types of emergent gameplay. But the players who just want to experience story content without some random pilot in an Ari's Inferno turning their mission into a respawn simulator also have a legitimate point. The real question is whether CIG can serve both audiences without alienating either. The answer is probably no, but a hybrid approach is better than committing entirely to one extreme and losing half the player base. So what does this actually mean for how you should approach Star Citizen going forward? First, recognize that different content will serve different purposes. If you want reliable, repeatable progression with your organization or friend group, instanced missions will be your best option. Lower risk of griefing, predictable difficulty scaling, clear reward structures. If you want emergent gameplay and you're willing to accept the chaos that comes with it, focus on open world content in contested zones like Pyro Stations or the Rock Cracker event. Second, don't assume instancing automatically means the game is going soft or becoming Care Bear friendly. CIG explicitly stated that instanced content will include PvP and PvPvE options, not just pure PvE experiences. Tactical strike groups, for example, is designed as fleet-scale combat that could support competitive play between organizations. Third, pay close attention to how CIG implements the transitions between instanced and open-world space. If they execute it correctly, you won't even notice when you're entering an instance. It'll feel like walking through a door or taking an elevator, not loading into a separate game mode. If they execute it poorly, it'll feel like every other MMO with obvious instance portals and immersion-breaking loading screens. That execution quality will determine whether this system enhances Star Citizen or fragments it. The technical architecture behind this matters more than most people realize. Instancing doesn't exist in isolation. It operates within and alongside server meshing, which is one of Star Citizen's most critical technological foundations. Server meshing allows multiple servers to work together, simulating different regions of space rather than requiring one monolithic server to handle everything. Static server meshing assigns different areas to different dedicated servers. Dynamic server meshing, which is still under development, will adaptively spin up and down servers based on population demand. If 300 players suddenly converge on Orison, the system should automatically allocate additional computational resources to handle the load. Instancing adds another layer of granularity to this architecture. When you enter an instanced mission, that instance might run on its own dedicated server, or it might be handled by dynamically allocated servers within the mesh. The replication layer 2.0 that CIG demonstrated at CitizenCon synchronizes all entities across all servers in the mesh, ensuring that no matter which servers are handling which parts of the universe, everyone perceives a coherent, synchronized experience. Within this system, instancing allows further subdivision beyond regional zones. A single bar in Area 18 could support multiple instances, each handling maybe 50 players to maintain performance and prevent overcrowding. A major mission event could spin up dozens of instances, each designed for 15 to 30 players with the same core objectives, so hundreds of players could experience the event simultaneously without interfering with each other. The technical complexity here is substantial, and CIG's track record with complex technical systems has been mixed. Look at the specific content CIG announced for 2026, and you can see their strategic thinking. The reworked Siege of Orison is the flagship example, taking content that catastrophically failed as an open-world event and redesigning it as a curated instance. Municipal Works represents progressive, chapter-based content that bridges multiple play sessions, with the upper area functioning as an open-world contested zone and the lower area fully instanced for story progression. Tactical Strike Groups is fleet-scale combat designed to create cinematic moments reminiscent of Squadron 42, with scripted sequences and coordinated objectives requiring different ship roles. Each of these represents a different application of instancing technology. Siege of Orison is about fixing broken content by controlling the environment. Municipal Works is about creating repeatable progression content that players can tackle over multiple sessions without losing progress. Tactical Strike Groups is about enabling large-scale coordinated combat that currently doesn't work in the open world because of balance problems and performance issues. But notice what's missing from this list. None of it is pure sandbox content. The Rock Cracker event, which is open-world industrial gameplay where organizations fight over mining platforms, exists separately from the instanced content. CIG is clearly pursuing parallel development tracks. Instanced content for one type of player experience, open-world content for another. Whether they can maintain investment in both tracks long-term, or whether one eventually dominates development resources, will determine what Star Citizen ultimately becomes. The economic implications of this split deserve attention. Star Citizen's economy is supposed to be player-driven, with mining, refining, trading, and crafting creating interconnected systems, where your actions in one area affect prices and availability across the entire universe. Crafting systems entering tech preview in late 2025 or early 2026 introduce player-driven production mechanics where crafted items have quality levels based on material grades, creating economic differentiation where player skill and resource access determine production outcomes. These systems fundamentally depend on persistent universe state. Refined materials extracted in one location need to be transportable, processable, and craftable into items that can be sold across multiple systems. That interdependence creates economic gameplay loops that function best in shared, persistent spaces rather than isolated instances. If instanced content provides better rewards or safer progression than open world content, players will naturally gravitate toward instances, which could hollow out the open world economy. If open world content provides significantly better rewards to compensate for the higher risk, instanced content becomes pointless for anyone who cares about economic progression. Balancing these parallel systems so both remain viable and populated is a design challenge CIG hasn't solved yet. And given their track record with economic balance, remember when mining was so profitable it broke the entire economy for 6 months? There's reason for skepticism. The unanswered questions about implementation are substantial. CIG outlined a direction for instancing, but didn't provide specifics about how it actually works in practice. If someone boards a shuttle with you to an instance location but isn't in your party, do they vanish when you transition? If an instance is designed for 20 players but only one person enters, does it wait for more players or put you in another instance with strangers? What happens if a player leaves the party while inside an instance? Are they kicked out into their own separate instance, or do they remain in the shared space? How does the party system even interact with instancing? Can you invite people to your instance after it starts, or is the group locked at entry? These aren't minor technical details. They're fundamental design questions that will significantly impact how instancing feels in practice. The hangar system provides a basic model. When someone enters your elevator, they get booted out when you transition to your private hangar. But that system works because hangars are explicitly private spaces. Mission instances are supposed to be shared group content, which is fundamentally different. CIG could implement open instances where anyone can enter regardless of party status, or closed instances where only party members are allowed. They could use matchmaking to fill instances with strangers, or require preformed groups. Each approach creates a completely different player experience, and CIG hasn't clarified which direction they're taking. The historical context matters. Star Citizen isn't the first game to face this dilemma. This tension between open-world sandbox design and instanced content goes back decades. Ultima Online launched as a pure sandbox where player killing was unrestricted, and within months the developers had to create separate PvE areas because the griefing was driving away the majority of players. EVE Online solved this with security zones, high-sec space where aggression triggers NPC retaliation, null-sec space where anything goes, and low-sec space as a middle ground. World of Warcraft popularized instance dungeons as a way to provide curated group content separate from the open world. Elite Dangerous implemented a solo mode where players could experience all content without any PvP risk, which immediately fragmented the player base and hollowed out the open world. Every solution creates trade-offs. Pure sandbox design enables emergent gameplay but also enables griefing and creates accessibility problems for casual players. Heavy instancing provides reliable content but reduces emergent interactions and can make the world feel empty. The hybrid approach CIG is attempting, maintaining both systems in parallel, is theoretically optimal but requires massive development resources and careful balancing to prevent one system from cannibalizing the other. No game has executed this hybrid approach perfectly at the scale Star Citizen is attempting. CIG is essentially trying to combine EVE Online's economic complexity, World of Warcraft's instanced content structure, and Elite Dangerous simulation fidelity into a single coherent experience. The ambition is admirable. The execution remains completely unproven. The core issue is this: instancing isn't the end of Star Citizen's original vision, but it is an admission that parts of that vision can't work without different tools. The open world isn't disappearing. The single universe promise isn't broken. But CIG is finally acknowledging that not every experience functions in a completely uncontrolled environment. If you've got strong opinions about this, either direction, drop a comment and explain your reasoning. Not just instancing bad or instancing good, but actually why you think one approach serves the game better than the other. The community conversation around this has been mostly people talking past each other, and it'd be valuable to see some actual substantive arguments. Thanks for watching. If this breakdown clarified what's actually changing with Star Citizen's instancing system, instead of just adding to the confusion, hit that like button and subscribe, because coverage of the 2026 content releases will continue as they actually launch. The reworked Siege of Orison, Municipal Works, tactical strike groups, all of it. Until then, fly safe and remember, the best emergent gameplay is the kind that doesn't end with you respawning in a hospital gown, wondering what just happened.